that I don't want to forget. All right.
I'm sad I missed it.
Recording. I know, and you were one of the people I felt so bad that we didn't have it because you were on, like your internet was wonky and
awful.
So tonight, chapter 5, I'm really enjoying book club, you guys. It's going really well. I love chatting through these things with you. Last week we had a smaller group and it was just as fun. Like I truly do enjoy this week to week with you guys. Tonight we're talking about fear, and I think this was around the chapter I was like, I think we should do this as a book club with the team, because I read this chapter and thought, like, it just makes dealing with fear tangible, which can be hard to do at times. You know, it just helps you look at fear in a different way, and it makes it like, it really helps sort your thoughts on how you think about fear. And really kind of one of my favorite things was like walking you through the process of, so what if the worst case scenario happens, you know, and really thinking through that, which is a big like therapy, I can't even think of what it's called, theory that we would use as we would counsel people, is truly look at anxieties and fears and walk them back through the worst case scenario and really have people think and hash out, like, what if that happened? Would it be as bad as like you're making it out to be? Or do you actually think you could survive it, you know? And I think that just is like the root of a lot of fear. So just like last week, I'd love us to just talk. Let's just share one part of, and we can do, let's talk through the chapter first, like if there's anything in the chapter specifically, and then we'll move over to homework. If there's anything there. So any quotes or stories or actions from the chapter that you guys wanna talk about that you really liked and how you're able to apply it now and think through it personally.
Yes, you know I always have things.
All right, Kathy, go for it.
And I had posted, in case I wasn't on, I didn't identify with a lot of this chapter, but a few things really caught my eye, because I think to me fear is an excuse, and that's not an acceptable excuse. I've been through too much to use fear as an excuse. So I Cindy knows I got plenty of other excuses. Fear isn't one of them. And my two quotes that I wrote down is, you never get stronger if you only do easy things. And then I also wrote down, fear is not the enemy. Waiting to stop feeling afraid is. Action is the antidote to fear. And those were the things that those are just so precise, and those are livable, like those are livable words to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the action being the antidote to fear truly is that. I mean, we have all faced fears in our business, even if you're brand new like Tabitha, or if you've been doing this like the longest, other than me, Alicia, like you, Shaylee, you do not look like yourself. I was just like, who is that on our Zoom call? It's a new girl. I haven't met her. And Ashley just joined us. Hey, Ashley, we're just chatting through the chapter. We just started, but so we all have faced fears already in our businesses, and I think we've realized, like, as you face your fears, you realize they're not as scary as you expect them to be on the other side. And it creates such confidence that you faced your fear, that even if the outcome isn't what you expect, in a bad way, it's not the best outcome, you still have gained so much confidence and belief in yourself from facing that fear that it's worth it. But somehow, because we're humans, the next time we have to do the same exact thing, we get scared again. But you're right. Why don't you talk real quick about what you did post in the Facebook page about going for no? Do you want to talk about that real quick, Kathy? Because
I went back and started doing some SoundClouds, and I don't know who, Amy Mellinger maybe, and she talked about the book Going for No, or Go for the No, and I guess the challenge in the book is to get 20 no's per day. The challenge is not one yes, it's 20 no's. And that was just a complete different turnaround to me, that why am I so nervous to ask? What's the worst that happened? They say no? Guess what? I said no. And here I am trying to learn and trying to do better and trying to figure it out.
Right.
But I said no. and that was that. I thought that was interesting. It was just it put it in perspective that what are you afraid of? You're afraid they're going to say no? Who cares if they say no? Move on.
Right. I said no. Who else on here said no when you were first asked? Tabitha, Ashley, almost everybody, right? So look at this. Look at that. Oh, so we all did. I mean, you guys, we need to wake up to what a no truly is in this business, because as we preach, I don't want to talk business all night, but like, no is the seed that you're planting, because you're getting the conversation started even when you get a no response. Because think about when you get a no from somebody, I want you to turn that inward to when you responded with a no. What happened after that? You paid attention, you were watching, you maybe said yes to a smaller thing in the business, like a sample, or started asking questions or looking things up on the internet about it. Like, you're starting these conversations are happening. I mean, I want to call them conversations, but the conversation is still going on their end. And we tend to like cut it off because we view the no as being this harsh, negative experience in our business. And that's not it at all. But going for no is a big, big deal. Another quick thing with that we've talked about in the past is rewarding yourself for getting so many no's. Like, so for every 10 no's I get, I'm going to eat a chocolate chip cookie, or I'm going to go get my nails done, or I'm going to buy that shirt at Target that I wanted and I didn't get last time. Like, set up a reward system for yourself and realizing that the no's are still a step in the right direction for your business. They still count in a major, major way. A lot of people just give up before they ever give the no's time to really process. Like,
and for me, that wouldn't be a failure. So for me, the success is the ask. It's not the answer. The success is that I did the ask and I put myself out there.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Kathy. All right. Who else?
I have something. I'm just trying to find the quote that I was looking for. But Kathy, I love what you just said, that the success is the ask. I don't think I've ever heard of that in my 8 years with Arbonne, and I love how you put that, because that's right. Like, the being successful is just doing the ask. Okay, hold on. Like, why can I not find this quote? It was about how she said that fear is going to be your companion for the rest of your life, and we need to stop fleeing from fear. Like, that's the worst thing you're doing right there, is just not trying to avoid it. And she said, doesn't matter how much experience or success or time or whatever you have, fear is always going to be there, basically. And I love that, when you apply it to Arbonne, it's so true. Like, it's so true. Like, you think when you promote to region or nation or whatever, like, the fear is going to be gone, that you magically will not be fearful to send the message or to get on stage and speak or whatever it is. And it's literally like, I still sweat, like, sending messages. I still have to like amp myself up. And I think you could apply it to parenting or whatever. Like, there's things I'm fearful about my kids now when they're young, but when I know when they're older, I'm going to have that plus some, so it's just like learning to deal with it. Like how this chapter talked about, I think is like, it's so good. I love that. Just the reminder, it's always going to be there. I love it's like a companion. It's going to be there for the rest of your life. So you just need to learn how to walk through it, to go through it. And, I don't want to say manage it, but I can't think of like the right word to walk straight through fear. Like how Nikki Smith talked about at the DM retreat. Like, the only way to get around it is to go through it. So that's my next
Find that quote too. This is like the one chapter I didn't highlight because I think I didn't have like a pen or a highlighter with me. So, but I remember reading that part. But
so I can share, Laura, if no one else wants to share.
I'll go after you, Cindy. Go ahead.
Okay. I just highlighted the part about remove the negative story that you tell yourself. It makes me think about Mel Robbins and how many GTCs ago was that? 3? 2?
well,
2
in person, 2, yeah. So it was 3 ago.
2, okay. So yeah, that's right, because then Rachel was last time. So she was on stage and she was telling us that we need to like change the way we tell the story in our head. So like if you're afraid of something, so anybody who's known me long enough knows that I have major anxiety getting on the airplane. Once I'm somewhere, I'm fine. But to get me there, like Laura watched me drive heave on my all fours through an airport to get on a plane. We were going to the Bahamas.
Multiple
She's like,
times I've seen you do this.
yeah,
As a
to
former flight
Vegas.
attendant,
Or
that
no.
makes me smile
Everyone's
from
looking, I'm like, she's fine. She's fine.
She just got to get on the plane. Just got to get her on there. But what Mel Robbins said was, you can't tell yourself, I'm afraid to fly. You need to change the way you think about it. And you have to say, I'm excited to fly. And like when you change that story in your head, you are able to like move forward and do the more positive things. So, you know, you can apply it to anything. I always go back to the airplane because that, I think there is nothing in the world that gives me the most vomitous feeling than it is for me to get into that airport and go and get on a plane. So when I tell myself, so that's what I do now. Like I'm going to get on a plane to go to Nashville in a couple months. And I'm going to tell myself, I'm excited to get on this plane. I'm excited because I know in my head when I get there, I'll be fine. But it's just getting there. So
Plane can't take out both of us at the same time, Cindy. You'll be okay.
so I'm going to hold Shaylee.
At like 4 in the morning to catch a 7 a.m. flight. But you know.
Bloody Marys, mimosas.
No, Joe swears they need to do that, but I'm always afraid of getting sick. And like, I just can't. So I just cling to my Arbonne tea and my blankie.
No, that's exactly what she always has, a cup of Arbonne tea in her hand.
Yep.
Like curled up on the airport floor.
Yep.
Well, this is actually the thing that I highlighted, one of them, because on page 97 it says, fear doesn't speak with words. She does her best to send a message by how she makes you feel. And we automatically assume that nausea, the upset stomach, the butterflies in your stomach are negative. And that's exactly what Mel Robbins says. And that's the point I was going to make tonight, is she says you just have to switch how you think about the butterflies in your stomach. So instead of like, if you're going to go on stage to speak, if you're afraid of public speaking, and like you have to tell yourself, because remember last week, I think it was last week, we talked about how your brain doesn't know truth from fiction, truth from a lie. It believes what you tell it. So if you turn that anxious, negative energy into positive excitement energy, because you get butterflies in your stomach when you're excited about something too, right? If you transition that, then it just puts you in a better space to move forward. And so as fear, it's good to have fear. I've read a lot of books that say, and if you haven't read Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule, you should get that. I think she talks about that in there. But fear is helpful. Like it's helpful to us because it is a way of keeping us safe. But as we get older, we attribute so many of those signs to things that aren't just about physically keeping us safe. It's guarding us emotionally too. So, and then right off of that one, I guess I'll talk about how I love how this really does help you think tangibly about fear, like to give you something that you can actually work with to overcome fear. So on page 101 and in the homework, so I guess we could talk about this later, but it talks about truly thinking of one of your biggest fears, whatever it is, and coming up with the worst case scenario, and then also coming up with the best case scenario. And so we would do this in therapy sessions where we truly would walk people back from their anxious thoughts about something specific, one step at a time. So one of my clients was always afraid that they would like pass out in a class. So we would be like, okay, so what is your fear about? So say you're sitting in class and you pass out. What would happen next? And they would walk through that. And I was like, okay, so if that happened, what would happen after that? Okay, then if that happened, what would happen after that? And we get to the deepest root of the issue we could and say, so this is the worst case scenario. Now that you see the worst case scenario, does it still feel as bad as you're telling yourself it is? And every time they would be like, it of course would be bad, but not near as bad as I'm already punishing myself for now in my fear. You know, So I just truly love that because it does work if you can just separate each layer and then also combat that with the positives of what would make it worth it to take those steps in fear. You can one day at a time work through them. So I just love that. I love taking things that seem like just like things like belief and stuff like that and really making it real with actionable steps. And so I love that she did that in this chapter. All right, who else wants to share?
I had one thing and it wasn't groundbreaking, but I thought it was funny. And it's kind of a helpful tool how, like she said, to rename whatever that feeling is that you're having, the weird one, like, you know, call it a shushi or whatever. And I realized that's something that like I already do when I find that I'm like afraid to do something, but it excites me. I actually default to using that, like a funny word. Like I say woozy all the time. I'm like, oh, that makes me woozy. like when I'm fearful of something, but I'm actually excited about it. So I thought it was funny that she said to try that. So
Does anybody else do that? I never have. I call it what it is. No, but that was good too. Again, another like very hands-on way of.
I like the actual, like the exercise that she had that wasn't in the homework, but just in the chapter.
Mhm.
The breathing exercise one, that was my favorite. But the woozy thing I thought was funny.
I'm more likely to say I'm freaking the F out. So woozy is probably more delicate way of putting
I
it.
do that, but that's what I do when I'm like just fearful but not excited. Woozy is like my default to like excited to do it. Like, you know, like I'm gonna send this ask. It makes me woozy, but like I know I'm gonna have it could yield a good result. Like
really interesting because I use Russian language when something not going my way. And as soon my husband can hear the foreign language, he's like, I better leave.
Here we go. I'm leaving the room. That's good. All right, what else do you guys have? Keep talking. I'm just going to grab a book off the shelf because I want to read something out of a different book. So go ahead. Somebody else want to share?
you guys really need to calm down.
I can hear you.
I'm just interested to hear what people had to say for the homework because I sat and stared at the homework. I was like, I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like, I mean, I've gotten to a really good place, but it hasn't always been great. So maybe I've already had the worst of the worst. I struggled with this one a lot.
Oh, here it is. All right. Okay.
You know what I think, Kathy, is that makes us realize that like whatever tiny thing there is that's holding us back that may not seem that big, like if there's nothing that's like worst case scenario you could think of, then do that thing. Like if there isn't a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the homework, Kathy, and did anybody else feel that way about the homework? I mean, I think it's very normal to feel that way. I think, honestly, for me, I feel that way about, like, all this homework. Like, I just sit down and I can't, like.
It, like, validated the reason to, like, move forward in the thing I was contemplating. It was, like I have all these, like, possible things that I'm like, oh, that could be bad. That's a risk. But it's like, is that bad? It's not bad enough for me to consider not doing it. So.
It's hard to move past that place. Yeah. So I think the thing is, instead of, at least when I think about homework and steps like this, I tend to be so like generalized with the things I'm thinking of that I can't move it in any direction. So I think it's helpful to like really think through like more specific things. And as you think through specific things, that kind of gives you a category of maybe like where you are fearful in that area of your life. So maybe it's like a mom thing. Maybe it's a work thing. Maybe it's something at home, or wanting to tackle learning something new, or something in your business. And doing something in your business could be something as simple as doing a Facebook Live, or doing your first in-person healthy living event at your home, or asking that person on your chicken list to take a look at the business. So maybe if you get a little bit more specific with your fears and write out worst case scenario of what you're so afraid of, that's where this is going to become a lot more helpful. So for example, so many people that join our team are super fearful about doing a Facebook Live on their main timeline. They're just afraid to do a 15-minute presentation because they don't want to go live for 15 minutes to talk about the products, even if they have a script. So that's your fear. So what about that scares you? So that would be the first question. What about that scares you? And the response might be that I like say the wrong thing about products and just like make a mess of the presentation. Okay, so let's say you actually do that. What then? Well, then I would feel incredibly embarrassed. I would be concerned that the person that hosted for me, I would be afraid to contact them and have conversation. Okay, why would you feel so you're embarrassed? So what's like, you go the next step down from there, right? So you just keep until you get down to the bedrock, and maybe being embarrassed is the bedrock. Okay, so you do a live and you're embarrassed. Let's talk through that, and then let's look at the best case scenario. You find someone to join your team and sell 2 RE9 lines. So we're going to weigh those together. So instead of being like, I'm afraid to build my business. Okay, what are you afraid of? It's like, I don't know how to put that in words. You got to be a little bit more specific. And that's probably the case with every fear, whether it's going back to school or starting a new job or joining a new mom's group or being the PTA president for the school year for the first time, or whatever it is. The more specific you are, the easier it is to break down. Did anybody do that well and want to share like what their breakdown was like, and what kind of, when you weighed the balance of the benefit, what kind that if you came to any conclusion? Did anybody get through that process that would want to share? If not, that's okay. Oh, I found it. Okay.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, no, it's all right.
No, go ahead.
It's just going to go back to the airplane because that was the simplest thing. Because the worst case scenario is that the plane goes down. And that is like the biggest fear that I honest to God have, is that the plane's going to go down and I'm not going to come home to my girls and Joe with the girls. So that's like my worst case scenario. Or my other worst case scenario is that I get really sick and I can't get up to go to the bathroom because the flight attendant is yelling at me that the seatbelt light is on, which has really happened. And a good experience, which has happened in real life, is that I sat next to somebody who joined our team after having a delightful conversation the whole way home from Nashville one time. Or not Nashville. Where was I? It doesn't matter where I was. But that's a positive that came out of it. Like, that's what can go right. What can go right is that the plane gets me home safe on time. What gets me home basically is just getting home safe and making new friends was like the positive outcome. And then in reality, that has really happened. So somehow I just need to keep remembering that these positive things happen more than the negative outcome one happens. And so that's what you need to focus on. So the retraining the brain. That was my breakdown.
Like that example is one where it's like, okay, plane goes down is a really bad worst case scenario. So it's one of those fears where you truly do have to look at like statistics and more. I don't want to say it's an irrational fear because it's definitely a fear, you know. So there's
But
definitely
my husband says, just get over it. You'll get into a car accident before you get into like a plane goes down. Like,
yep, I know.
that's what he
And
keeps
Cindy
telling
never
me.
drives again. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. Hey Trisha, welcome. Alicia, were you gonna share something?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I kind of struggled with this section because I feel like I'm not really fearful of a lot. And I heard this once, like this kind of concept, Stephen Furtick did in a training a sermon a couple years ago. And he said, like, what is your worst case scenario? And did this whole thing, what happened? And mine, of course, went to my kids. Something happened to my kids dying. Like, that's the worst case scenario I could ever happen in my whole life. Like, what would you do? And I was like, well, it would really suck. But like, you would go through, you know what I mean? You get through it. And it's kind of been like my process for everything. But for like Arbonne, um, I was thinking like, what's a fear? Again, I'm like thinking like, well, we don't have fears. We all have Arbonne IDs. Like we took our idea of starting a business and we did it and we're here. But then I'm like, all right, so what are we fearful about? Like what sending messages on Facebook? So I think that's like something a lot of us, everyone can relate to is sending a scary ask. Like that's like everyone has felt that feeling before. And my thing is like, what's the worst thing that could happen? They write you back a nasty message, right? They block you, delete you, they block you, they post your screenshot and they put it on Facebook or whatever. Like, what is the worst case scenario? And then I'm like, what would I do? And I'm like, honestly, if that ever happened to me, if I asked them to host a party and they posted my message on Facebook and made me look like an idiot or whatever, I think I would just laugh and think they're really mean and I don't want them on my team or in our event anyways. And like, that's like my go-to now when I'm sending messages. I'm like, what's the worst thing they could say? Like what they could call me every name in the book. They could embarrass me. I'm like, at the end of the day, I'd be like, wow, they're a jerk. And I don't want to deal with them anyways. Right. And that has really like helped me business wise, just go ahead and send the message. But what's the best case scenario? And we all know it's, you get the event booked, you get the ask, you get them to join their team. And I'll tell you, I've never had the worst case scenario happen to me, like ever, or anything like in the realm of worst case scenario, in the orbit of that happen. It's usually just a, no, thank you for reaching out to me, I'm okay, or whatever. So I think that just, don't hype yourself too much up about it. Like when you're working your business of the fears you have, to really practice like the peeling the layers back, as I think has helped me got to where I'm at today, so.
I feel like this is a mini training today. It's hard to separate this one from actually like working our business. I'm trying to like do that as we talk through things, is to keep it more personal, but the personal ones are like personal fears are deep, and we could be on here for hours. So all right, anything else from the homework? Anything? Anybody? Number 7, think about in homework. Think about a specific time you failed or made a faithful attempt in learning and you were able to mine gold from it. Anybody have an experience like that? Nobody? Well, I would say one of my biggest like experiences would have been and for me it was business related, like when I look at my whole life, but when I did lose my region, it was so difficult because it's hard, especially at that level when you have a team and you have parts of your life that are signified by having a title in a company that people know, to lose that. You identify yourself in that role. And you have to learn through experiences like this to see yourself differently than a title in a business. but it was hard for me to separate the two. It took me a while. Like, it took me a while to really get to the point where I'm not going to say what you think, to get to the point where I was feeling like a failure. Like, I was really confident throughout the process for a long time that we were going to build back really strong and quickly, and it didn't for me. And it didn't because I had a lesson to learn. That's what it was. My team was working hard. I was working really hard, but there was a lesson in there for me that I had to learn through the process. And it was that like failures truly are what makes you stronger, that the comebacks are so much more empowering and significant and inspiring than the setbacks. And you can't have a comeback without a setback, but you're the one that decides through what you might deem as a failure, how to define the failure and what that failure is going to mean to you in your life and the people around you that are watching. And so going through that was really, really difficult. But I will tell you, it was probably one of the more difficult things I've ever done, because it was just such a mental battle that I had to choose to fight every day and choose to believe in myself every day and choose to show up and work every day and choose to believe that I could come back stronger and have more of a thriving business. And it was like I had to prove myself in a way I never had before, and I did. And so when I stuck with it, even when I was like this close to giving up, like so close to giving up, like I had to make it over that threshold. And then it was just like I had crossed the finish line of a marathon, and then everything just like opened and blossomed and again, and we had abundance again in my business. And so it was just me having to identify what felt like a failure more as just like another learning process and another step in the process for me to finally get to, where I was going. And now I can look back, and I learned so many lessons then that have helped me in the 5 years or 4 years it's been since then, to be better in all areas of my life. And so what seemed like a failure then truly was just a very significant learning process that just kind of knocked me on my butt for a little while, So for me, I came back so much stronger than I ever thought I could be because of that experience. So on that note, one of my favorite books, I read this when I was fighting to get my region back, called Failing Forward by John Maxwell, Turning Mistakes into Stepping Stones for Success. It is a long read, like it is tiny words. It's a long read, but this book saved me. If you are ever in that place, and a lot of you aren't right now, it sounds like, but remember this, to ask me about this book if you're ever in a place where you just feel like I'm a failure at this, but whether it's your business or anything else, you have to read this. It is just painted with stories of people you don't know that went through what you would consider significant failures and how they made them meaningful. And it truly is what kept me, what it felt like breathing in my business. But the one story that stuck out to me for a long time, every time I read a story, I would pick out whatever was the most significant, whatever was the most significant from the book, and I would get a little trinket of some sort to remind me, or not from every book, but the ones that really moved me. And from this book, when I read it, it was a golf ball. So I have this golf ball that I still keep sitting on my desk every day because it reminds me of the story of Arnold Palmer. Do you guys know the story of Arnold Palmer? So it just reminded me that he is famous because of his worst golf game ever. And it just makes you think, like, look at what he's built from what he would consider his biggest mistake. So I want to read a part of it to you. I don't want to read too much, but I also want to make sure that like you get the picture. Maybe I'll just take a photo of it and put it in the comments of our discussion so you can read it. But yeah, I won't read. It's like 3 pages. I don't want to read all that. Well, I would, but you guys would be bored with it. But so I'm just going to take a picture of those 3 pages and post it in the comments of the discussion that I put up after this, so you guys can read it. But I just remember being like, that is so telling. Can you imagine, like, he has a plaque, he has a statue in his honor. His statue, his only statue at the hole that he had his worst golf game at. And that's what really made him known. Like, that's what started it all. And so I just found that so powerful when you talk about failure and fear. Because like it says here at the very end of the chapter, you are not your failure and you can never be one. Failure is just an event. It's not a characteristic. People cannot be failures. So I love that she talked about that. Anybody have, I know this started with fear and it ends with failure. Does anybody have anything else to add from homework or want to say anything about the part that talked about failure from this chapter?
It's reminding me that, like, all these things you're saying, and I've read it before, it's something about, like, you wouldn't let anybody talk to your children the way the inner voices in your head talk to you. And that's sort of where I'm at, is that if I heard somebody say these things to Brent or Evelyn, there'd be problems. But yet I hear it every day about myself. Quieting those voices is what I need to do.
She has an Evelyn too. She's not talking about my Evelyn. If I hear anybody, like I did the other day, did you guys see my story?
I did. And I would have done the opposite.
My mom, I do not remember this at all, but my mom sends me this link. I just want to read you the correct title. She was like, I remember I started getting bullied in the 3rd grade and it lasted till like 8th grade. And it was so bad that I don't like, and I know everybody that experiences that like has to work through it, but I don't think I truly worked through it till a couple years ago. And I still find myself going back into certain personality traits that I have because of that. But my mom sent me, when she saw my story, this link that is 25 helpful Bible verses about bullying. And she's like, the first was exactly what you did in junior high. I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, open it. She said, you would every night lay in bed and pray for the girls who were mean to you while you were falling asleep. I was like, I did that? She's like, yeah. Can you imagine Evelyn laying in bed right now praying for those boys? She's like, I wanted to rip their faces off. I need to teach her to do that. Oh. Anyways, yes. We are the meanest to ourselves for sure. All right, guys. Anything else? Okay, so we're done for tonight. Are you guys liking book club? Yeah? Okay, good. So chapter 6, define your dream. Really good chapter. I for sure want you guys really doing your best to think through the homework this time because this is a funner one. So, all right, I will get things posted as previous weeks. Make sure you post so we have some kind of discussion going on. We want people to feel like they're missing out so they join us. And I will see you next Thursday. All right, bye everybody.
Good night, everyone.